prior to experiencing a deep loss, I had assumptions about the future, that it would be generally okay, that it would be exciting and full of adventure and full of the people I cared about. What I've had to confront very viscerally in the face of loss is that may not at all be what the future holds. I've completely let go, or been forced to completely let go of who might be in it, of where I might be. I think I've had to kind of deeply come to terms with the fact that I don't know.
We always say, when you think about the past, even if you went back in time, you wouldn't actually do anything differently because that's who you were at that moment. That's what you knew. And you would make all the same choices because you were doing the best you could, with what you had at the time. So even though that version compounds and you grow and you become your new person, in the moment, you are who you are. You're still that person doing those things in accordance with the version of you that you are in this moment.
There's just no guide for this. Everyone's different. There's no kind of way to predict what being okay is eventually going to look like. It's important to recognize that I'm not going to be who I was prior to this loss. That self isn't accessible to me anymore in the same way, and that's okay too.
What have you found to be helpful? What has that process been like for you? What skills or tools do you use to get through that?
All of this is easier said than done. The biggest things that have helped me, which I need to actively practice, these don't come naturally, are
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Becoming You. Today's guest is actually my first cousin, Emily Fuhrman, and I'm so happy to have her on the show and introduce her to all of you. So, Emily, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And I just love that we, as adults now, adult cousins, are really choosing to be in each other's lives in a meaningful, intentional way. I know I mentioned this to you, but it's funny to me to reflect back on our childhood. Our dads, one of six, each of them, basically. And all of the family stuff that we do, it's contingent upon our parents choosing to bring us around. But as you get older in life, you get to choose really who's in your life. So it just means so much to me that, you and I are building our adult cousin connection in new ways. And having you on the show is just a perfect example of that. So thank you, for being here and being part of my life. It's really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, likewise. I think it's great to autonomously be able to connect as adults, especially as we're, in some ways, our life paths are crossing over more. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. In terms of crossing over, even, between travels, like physically crossing paths, and then in terms of interests, having, just kind of discovering commonalities in life. I think that's so cool, especially because you grew up in Virginia, I grew up in New Jersey. It's not like we saw each other a ton growing up. So developing this friendship now really feels like we're getting to know each other, in a brand new way, even though we've known each other technically our whole lives. We've known of each other in that regard.
For sure. And I actually think there's something special as well about having known each other when we were very young, because as kids growing up around similar ages, I think that's not something that I have with all of the friends in my life today. So yeah, I really appreciate that too.
Yeah, definitely. And being kind of that witness or testament to different stages of our lives too, even by association, or let's say our uncles or our aunts, what they've been through at different times in life, like we were there for it. And then we've seen and can look back on, many years at this point and hopefully many more to come too. And it is really cool because no matter how many friends we make in life, they're not usually there from the start. So there's always some gaps that occur. And it's nice to fill in the gaps with other people who were around, during different times and different stages of life. And I love that you pointed that out.
Yeah, for sure. Having known each other's specific past selves is definitely unique.
Yes. And a perfect point for this show, which is all about, how did our past selves lead to our present self and what's our current self doing to get us, into the future in a way that is meaningful for us, in a way that aligns with our values. And something that just comes to mind immediately because you and I are both kind of exploring this area. But I just visited you recently in London and then got to see you in New York. And I definitely want to delve into how you wound up in both of those places and give you a chance to kind of share that. But we're both trying to explore other languages and other cultures and learn, different languages and different cultures at this time, in our 30s. And to just, I have all my reasons of why I'm doing that, but I'm curious if you want to share your reasons. And as Americans, we kind of, in general, can take for granted that most people will speak English, or English is, the language of the world. So to go out of our way to learn a language, it's pretty uncommon. And then the fact that both of us are doing it, again, is one of these commonalities that it's so exciting to discover, that we have at this current point in our life.
Absolutely, yeah. Happy to go into that more. My mom is Korean, as you're well aware, and
Yeah.
growing up, I had plenty of activities as kids do, and I think when I was young and my brain was perhaps more in a state to absorb an additional language other than English, my mom kind of made the decision that it wasn't something I really needed to learn. That learning Korean was not something that I needed to devote time to when I was growing up. I think particularly as she had moved to the States from Korea, I don't think she thought it would be particularly useful for me. And as a result, growing up, I was familiar with aspects of Korean culture through the food or through my mom's Korean friends. But over time, I actually became curious, and this is originally what prompted it, about whether there was a whole dimension of my mom's personality that I didn't have access to because I couldn't speak Korean. She being fully bilingual and having friends who speak both languages, I kind of started to wonder if there was some way I didn't know her because I wasn't able to speak Korean at all. Which, as a side note, I do not know whether that's meaningful or true, but I started having some curiosity about it. And when lockdown happened in New York and our schedules became so uh, different with large swaths of unstructured time, at least for me. In the beginning, I decided it was a good time to try to start teaching myself and to get to know, at least starting with the alphabet, get to know how to write letters and do some online courses I was able to find that were available because it, I think the curiosity and that opportunity to do something with the time that was newly available to me. That's when I started studying more seriously or more regularly. Maybe is the word.
Right. That's awesome. And I love the origin story behind it because it's so true. I mean, we, again, maybe take for granted or just appreciate that other people have taken the time to learn our language. And then we don't always know where they came from or what that their mother tongue really means to them. And there's plenty of things that don't translate perfectly. And I've even heard for folks that are speaking a second or third language, hearing things in their initial language it resonates so differently for them, right? Hearing their name or hearing like, I love you, and just little things like that go a lot further when it's spoken in, the language that you were born into. And I think that's so beautiful that you were curious about your mom and her personality and who was she maybe even before she was your mom, right? And this entire life she lived and culture she was part of. And then, so I'm curious, have you started trying to talk with your mom, my aunt yet in Korean, or how is that going?
So it's really funny in that my mom, a very close person to me, and one of my best friends are both Korean, and I'm still at the stage where I'm extremely shy to practice with both of them.
Yeah, I completely get that.
Which I don't know why. I mean, I'm very fortunate to have built-in understanding language partners, but I'm still getting over that shyness. With my mom, though, I kind of hoped that So what went on in my mind was
Yeah, tell
she
me.
taught me how to speak my first language. So surely she'll help me along as I try to learn the second. So I think I was hoping she would maybe quiz me more or try to start conversations in Korean more, but I think she's very much letting me set the pace there. So I'll every now and then drop in a sample sentence I'm trying or like say something in Korean instead of English. And of course, she's very receptive. I think I just because I'm shy about it, it's kind of all on me to practice. But we do practice, and she encourages me. And I think even though my accent is probably very funny to her, I think she's enjoying the fact that I'm.
That's so beautiful. And it's always great when you are practicing the language and someone is receptive to that. They're not criticizing you or judging you, and maybe having, like you said, humor with it. So even if it sounds funny or different to her, she's still embracing the fact that, hey, my daughter wants to learn this and wants to be part of my culture. In a real way. So I'm sure over time you'll grow more confident and you guys will be able to chat in that way. And you can always just use the filler words that and just say those all the time and then say the rest. And it'll kind of be like, a Spanglish version of speaking Korean in the meantime.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Which I love. No, that's so cool. And thank you for sharing that. I hope that inspires people who have always thought about trying to learn a new language and to just get curious about other cultures. There's so much we can learn from other people. And even if we don't know it completely, just learning different phrases breaks down a lot of walls and barriers that we have built up within humanity to show, like, hey, we're all just people. We're all just trying to figure this out. And words are basically just words. It's not actually that anyone is saying anything super profound and we just can't understand it necessarily, right? It's just probably saying the same things like, oh, I have to go to the store today, right? I have to run errands. But then you're saying it in another language. And it gives your brain a chance to grow and adapt, which of course will fight dementia and things like that. So there's real neuroscience behind why you should try to do something like this. But if language is your thing, consider this your sign. And I hope you go and chase it.
Absolutely. And I will
Yeah.
also add, I have learned through this process how little it takes to get a basic point across, even if my sentences are bad. Um, a jumble of well-meaning words can can succeed in communicating something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have body language to help us. And also, I think in English or whatever your first language is, we just know so many words. So we say so many words. But when you're listening to someone, you're probably just listening in general, not to each word. You're not thinking about every single word. So I think if we remember that, it kind of takes some of the pressure off of trying to chase and track every single thing that's happening in another language. It's a lot, and just a good reminder to be patient with yourself, go slow. And like you said, you're setting the pace and your mom's letting you do that. And I think that's beautiful. Because however she was teaching you English back in the day was out of necessity. And this is out of, luxury, even. Like it's just a choice you're making.
Very true.
So cool. And I know you mentioned in there during COVID, you were in lockdown in New York. So you're in New York City. You obviously at some point moved from Virginia to New York. So this is your life in Manhattan. And I was also in Manhattan at the time. But it's funny, like that's not when our adult lives were crossing paths. We were both, bunkered down doing our own thing. So tell me what that journey was like for you. Because for me, I started this podcast. And for you, what were you up to?
Yeah, I mean, for the first part, getting from Virginia to New York, I think that was an interesting, very, very formative moment actually for me because it was a couple years after I graduated college and I was kind of working my first um, 9 to 5 corporate job out of college, which in a lot of ways was challenging and interesting and um, there it was a great opportunity for a recent grad, um, and I in to coincide with a friend actually decided to abruptly quit that job and move to New York because I had been feeling a a lack of fulfillment. I know that a lot of people might feel in a very mundane schedule with a not so enjoyable commute. But I think I was also the contrast going from undergrad, where I had the freedom to structure my days and pursue exactly what was interesting to me. In this environment, while I had some flexibility to do that, it felt very, very alien, and like I was only delivering things useful for kind of niche projects that weren't personally important to me, which also, of course, is the nature of a job and the nature of getting paid. But after a while, it started to wear on me. I didn't feel creatively fulfilled. I didn't feel really professionally fulfilled either. Um, and recklessly, uh, given the timing and the recession and all of that, I decided that I would risk that stability to try to find something more fulfilling, um, very recklessly, because I did not have a job lined up in New York. I figured that I would freelance based on my set of self taught skills and did that, when which is a great thing about youth, because you can make rash decisions like that, or you can make kind of abrupt, thoughtful, but potentially irresponsible decisions like that and absorb the risk or be motivated by the risk. And that's what ended up being the case for me. So yeah, it was a pretty abrupt, intuitive decision to switch to a different path.
Beautiful. And I love that you followed your intuition like that. And I know we attribute it to youth and just being a little bit impulsive and a little bit pragmatic and just seeing what happens. But to quit your job in this day and age, too, I mean, everyone always says, like, because the job market ebbs and flows. But I think just the act of quitting something is no longer serving you, it's no longer aligned. That's super empowering to be in that place and that position to kind of close the door and say, okay, this isn't my responsibility anymore. That business is going to continue. I need to go and do something different for myself. A lot of employees sometimes feel this obligation or sense of loyalty to see success in a business past the point that it's, been helping them. And now it's detrimental even. So I love that you were just like, no, like that was good. And now I need to do something different. And I know you had the support of a friend you mentioned, which is awesome too. I mean, community cannot be overstated enough. It's so important on our journey to just have people in our corner who believe in us and maybe are even doing the same thing and we can follow their example. But then to go to New York City, obviously it's the place where dreams can come true. But at the same time, like you have to work for it because it's so competitive. So just amazing betting on yourself in that way and seeing it through no matter what, even if it meant freelancing, even if it meant going out and eating what you kill, as they say, which I don't know if I love that phrase, but kind of funny anyway.
It gets at that survival theme, I think, where you
Right.
have no choice but to find something that works.
Right. Exactly. And it really brings that out in you, right? Where you're like, okay, this is it. I want to see what I'm made of. Let's do it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And New York in itself is inspiring, and it is a great place to go for this kind of impulsive change, given it's got so many opportunities. But I also think the simple fact of deciding to leave behind stability for that uncertainty and for that unknown is, as you say, very empowering in and of itself. And I think being able to kind of check in with my intuition and make an abrupt change if something isn't working is something that I've come to value in myself over the years. Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest abrupt change, but big ones have happened since. So
Yeah. Right. Speaking of, I mean, obviously you're not even in New York anymore, although we did just see each other there in passing, which was awesome. I love seeing you and just making time for each other. It's such a gift, because you have to be intentional with the people in your life or it just won't happen. But that's not your home base anymore. So tell us about your new home base and what that's like and how did you wind up there?
yeah, my new home base is in London, across the pond, as they say, and
Yeah.
yeah, this I mean this was another move that I cannot fully explain beyond the fact that it was in the back of my mind for a long time, that I wanted to live for a time outside of the US. I didn't know how or where that would be. Um, Working for a company with offices in both locations, again, prompted by lockdown when everyone's day to day changed so dramatically. I thought that would be a good time to ask if, in addition to all the flexibility we suddenly had to get used to, like this additional layer of flexibility, me completely moving out of the country, that is, would be something that they could support. Um, so it was partly opportunistic for sure, just as something that in that moment became a bit more possible, where I thought I just need to ask now. Um, I had also around that time hit 10 years of living in New York, which struck me as a nice solid number to
Yes.
kind of allow me to leave it behind.
Yeah.
And because there is that as well, I think an attachment to cities where your closest friends live, where you've lived and invested your time and effort and energy. Um, so the thought of leaving that behind was also scary. I think what's made this transition much easier for me is the fact that I still do get to work intermittently, from the office that I used to work in New York. So I am able to keep in touch with my friends back there. I can retain a sense of it being kind of a home, where I think if I had completely cut ties with my employer, and had picked up and moved without a pattern of going back periodically, psychologically, this would have been harder for me. But I still feel connected. And I think that um, that has made it a lot easier.
Right. No, and that's such a good thing to point out too, because there's plenty of people who do want to start over and move to a new city for various reasons. And sometimes they're like us and they're solo and we could just be impulsive and go do the thing. And other times, there's dependence or other opinions involved. And it takes a little bit longer or more questions get brought in. But there's still the fact that people move all the time. They move to new cities and they try to build a new community in that city. But there's something to be said about the community you're leaving behind and keeping that afloat. So I'm glad that you were able to do that, not only with your colleagues, but with your friends too. You developed literally a decade in New York of an identity and a community and a bunch of friends. So to leave that behind and then never look back, it's almost not even fair to yourself, right? And your own identity, because psychologically, now your brain's like, wait, was that not real? Am I in fight or flight now? Like, what just happened? So that's a great call out. And I love that for you. It's so awesome.
Yeah, it's funny how you just mentioned the like, is was that real or is that real kind of question. And I think that's a real one, where for any moment when the big things that comprise your identity suddenly get switched up, there is a sense that your past life or your life prior to that moment or that change, like before it's been connected to your overall narrative, there is a sense of like, is that still me? Can that still be me? Um, and I think it can be very jarring to just have a fresh start like that when you're still not wanting to let go of the selves you were, ahead of the one you were post change.
Right. Right. And the first thing that comes to mind, which I know every human probably can relate to this, but like there's a grieving process that goes through that too. Like you're grieving an old version of yourself, but also the versions of yourself that could have happened if you just stayed there too. Right. So although you're having this renewal, rebirth, reinvention, whatever you want to call it, there's still the fact that, okay, I have to accept the fact that there is an ending and now there's a new beginning, and just hearing your story, I mean, I think it's so important to just validate everything you went through because it is real, you know? And I know in our brains, like our brains almost want to make light of things so that it doesn't feel so heavy, right? So to say, oh, was that even real? Did that even happen? It's like, oh yeah, just 10 years, whatever, like on to
Yeah,
the next thing, right? And so often we move from one thing to the next thing to the next thing and we don't ever look back because for numerous reasons, but it's so important to periodically take stock, not only of everything you've done and how far you've come, but also what version of yourself got you to where you are today. And how do you practice gratitude for her or him, you know, or them in the past? Because it was their choice to change something that now gives you the life you have today, which may seem happier or whatever it seems, but it didn't just happen overnight or by itself.
for sure. Yeah. And I also like to keep things simple for myself and think of the current path I'm on as the
Hmm.
only possible one for who I am.
Mm,
Like I don't
cool.
I don't like thinking about other possible paths because
Right.
to me this is the only possible one. And I don't
Right.
know if that is just a mental shortcut to stop me from stressing out about other ways my life could have gone, but uh, there is a comfort in that as well, where and a sense of kind of inevitability where I think of course I'm here. This is the only way things could have unfolded.
Hmm. Wow. Yeah. I love that you called it a mental shortcut. And immediately I'm thinking about fate and destiny versus like the free will and choose your own adventure way of living life. So, what are your thoughts on that? That I'm throwing you a curveball because this just popped in my head.
Oh, that's so funny. I mean, the thing is my thoughts on that don't seem meaningful to me. Like I almost
Okay.
don't care because
Yeah.
to me the feeling of free will doesn't go away even if I think everything's predetermined. Um, like it doesn't really matter to me if it was somehow predetermined that I would like drink my tea at this moment because I still think I'm reaching out to drink it. And maybe I won't drink it, you know. But I guess
Exactly.
internally, all of that it doesn't matter either way to me. And maybe I'm just not. I think when I look at the past, there is something comforting to me about those moments being immutable or unchangeable. You know, they happened that way and they'll have happened that way forever. Like nothing can change the past. Um,
Right.
in terms of the future, I simply don't know. I
Right.
experience free will, but I don't
Hmm.
have strong opinions on whether I have it really
Right.
or not.
Right. That is remarkable. And of course, I can hear what you're saying and think about my own lived experience because that's the only one I have like control over or the vantage point of. But the first few things that kind of come to mind was even in the last 6 years, like I mentioned, I started this podcast 6 years ago and who I am today. Although certain through lines are the same, right? Like I still value connection. I still want to interview people and hear about their stories and learn from their lived experiences. Who I became along the way has really been shifted and molded by various events, various life events, you know, and something that happened in the last couple years. I lost a cousin of mine on my mom's side, and then we both lost, you know, an immediate family member on our dad's side of the family. And when that happened, it felt like obviously everything gets put into perspective when you go through death, and death alone at any stage in life, it's like sometimes hard to comprehend and all these different things. But for me, it went from I'm living life for all these reasons. I love to travel. I want to check things off the list, da, 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 to all of a sudden, okay, even though I want to go back to XYZ country, if I go with random people, that's no longer going to be valuable to me. I want to be surrounded by people who matter to me. I want to be intentional. I don't want to miss these opportunities with people who matter to me or people I want to matter to me because we don't know when our time is up, but we all know it will end at some point, right? Because we can die at any point. So that was a huge shift for me. But hearing what you're saying, where it's like, okay, even though that feels like a huge shift and it feels like I'm making this choice to do things 180 degrees different. And maybe it was 90 degrees different, but still to do it differently, to think about it differently. But then on some layer or level, that version of me was meant to happen no matter what, possibly, right? And you're saying it doesn't even matter if it was meant to be or it wasn't, like this is who you are now. And it's so amazing because so often I think, okay, if these things didn't happen, then I wouldn't have become this person. I wouldn't have done this thing. I needed these things in place to lead to this. I don't know. Do you ever think that way? Or could anything happen and you'll still, wind up how you're meant to wind up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a sense that there's a future state that is inevitable at this point. Largely because I'm ignorant of it. So I don't know what to think about fate in that way, because it's only something that becomes visible when you look back, from my perspective. And I think it's not so much that I like do or don't believe in a deterministic universe, because I don't have evidence to make a claim there.
Hmm.
I think in my day to day, it doesn't have a bearing on what I choose to do. And I can also recognize, I recognize chance and and kind of fortuitous encounters. I think, um, so. Yeah, I wouldn't agree or disagree with
Fair. Yeah.
my path being set ahead of time. I think, um, but when you mention, loss and death, I think one way that has one effect that has on, or has had on me, in terms of thinking about the future, is that it's made it a lot. How to put this? I think prior to experiencing a deep loss, I had assumptions about the future, that it would be generally okay, that it would be exciting and full of adventure and full of the people I cared about. And it's not that I no longer think of the future that way, but what I've had to confront very viscerally, in the face of loss, is that may not at all be what the future holds. I think there was a kind of quiet assurance I had for a lot of my life, which made reckless decisions possible, even, this quiet
Right.
belief that, of course, yeah, things are going to turn out okay. And I think it's a lot harder for me now to make assumptions about the future. What I do know is, when I'm able to tell, as I know you are as well, when I'm acting in a way that's true to myself, and when I'm making decisions that are true to myself. And in that respect, I think my life couldn't go any other way. If I follow that
Yes.
kind of internal voice. But in terms of thinking about, a fixed future, I think especially lately, I've completely let go, or been forced to completely let go of who might be in it, of where I might be. And there are things I can do today to make my present more stable and predictable. Um, but ultimately, I think I've had to kind of deeply come to terms with the fact that, I don't know.
Wow. Well, very well said. And it's so true. A lot of times we seek and chase stability because it feels comfortable, like, oh, I have control over my life. Nothing's going to change. The reality is things are going to keep changing. And our ability to adapt with that change is really where our resiliency comes into play. But I love the fact that you reiterated basically your values and who you are is the reason that these things are going to happen the way they're happening. And I think that's so true because we always say, when you think about the past, even if you went back in time, you wouldn't actually do anything differently because that's who you were at that moment. That's what you knew. And you would make all the same choices because you were doing the best you could, with what you had at the time. So even though that version compounds and you grow and you become your new person, the new version of you or a continuation, in the moment you are who you are, right? And whether you have self-awareness or not, you're still that person doing those things in accordance with the version of you that you are in this moment. So thank you for saying it that way and recapping it. So I wasn't thinking so abstractly, because it's true. I'm like, what about all these paths? But you're right. It's like, it just boils down to the path you're on and the present version of yourself, and that's what we have. Us right now, this is what we have.
Yeah, I think that's more what I'm trying to say, where I can't even picture another way things would have gone. Um, when I do think about kind of if I would do the past differently, if I were to go do it again, it just seems like so much work to even have to like make all of
Yeah.
those decisions again and like work so hard again. So I don't
Yes.
tend to even entertain that really.
No, I'm with you. When it's in the past, I want to leave it in the past. I don't want to give it extra attention. I want to just keep moving forward on to the next thing. And I think it gave me pause, the way that you described how you used to think about the future versus how you do now, thinking like all these people will just be there, right? And then the reality is you kind of only have yourself for as long as you live at the end of the day. Like that's really what it boils down to, from birth to death. Like you are your one constant. Everything else is kind of variable and can change at a moment's notice. And you mentioned like how dealing with loss and things like that. And I know we've talked about this. And before, I mean, you can go in any direction you want, but there's something that you had shared with me that I wanted to share with the audience, because we all know people going through loss and grief. I even have friends right now who are going through it. And for some of them, it feels like, for a lot of people, it feels all encompassing. What I've noticed is different people handle it differently. Some people get really angry and they focus so much on how are people showing up for them. Even though they're experiencing this loss with another person, they want to know everyone alive is remembering what they're going through. And it could be loss of your health, it could be loss of another person. I mean, there's all different types of loss of a job. The loss itself can play a factor, but it's the way people are coping with it that I find pretty interesting. As friends, I think and acquaintances, and just anytime you interact with another human who's sharing something deeply personal or something that they're struggling with, you want to show up for them and be present with them, but we don't always know what to say or what to ask. And you had told me basically keeping it simple. But how are you feeling today? What's going on today? And with a segue or a second question of, what can I do for you? And I know that second question is always like so vague, and people are like, nothing, I'm fine. That's usually the follow up. So I don't know that that's the perfect question, but the first initial one of just like, hey, how are you actually feeling? Because not every day feels the same, right? And giving them a chance to tell you where they're at before you just assume a heap load of stuff. Because, like I said, everyone's handling it differently, and their responses may surprise you, but at least just being present for them and letting them feel what they're feeling, that's probably the best thing we can do for someone going through, any sort of loss.
Absolutely. That is such a thoughtful question to ask. So thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I mean, in terms of how I'm doing today, I feel like I am at a stage in my grief where it is less all encompassing than it was maybe in three months ago even. Um, one thing I have noticed, I think through this process, I've become very attuned to how I'm doing physically. Where if I feel a very like physical buildup of some kind of emotion, whether it is inexplicable anxiety about something that wouldn't normally make me anxious, or whether it's deep irritation at something small, that's kind of become a signal to me that there's some unresolved grief that I need to kind of give some space to let out somehow. Usually that's just letting myself cry, but that um, the buildup of unresolved grief can surface in unexpected emotions. So I've become more attentive to that, I think. But yeah, in terms of what I was saying about the future before, I think that for me, the experience of grief has been one of it's really drained hope out of a lot of my day to day or visions for the future, um, and I do feel like I'm slowly able to regain that as well. Like most people say, it's not a linear journey. It's not like you're feeling very hopeless here and like it's slowly ticking up. There are
Hmm.
definitely ups and downs, but I think so much of it is the painful process of transforming your sense of self around this void that's suddenly in your life. You have to ask the same questions you would in any major life transition, like who am I without this person? Um, who am I given this massive change? What is my identity now that the family structure has changed? It's very it's a very existential process, which of course involves deeply missing the person that you lost, but um, does force you to kind of confront the ways your identity has to shift in relation to that too.
Right. That is such a good point. And it also sheds light on why some people might be experiencing the anger I was mentioning, right? Just feeling stuck in how things don't feel fair. And now they have to figure out who are they without this person or without this job, this career, or this capability, even in your own body, right? If you go through some sort of, I mean, there's all different types of like able related losses, but all of that can come with all of the stages of grief, which I know anger is one of them. I don't know what order, but anyway, um, it's just, I think it's such good awareness to have too, because sometimes we forget what it feels like to go through something if we're not experiencing it ourselves firsthand. But people are going through this type of stuff all the time. And then still trying, like you said, to remember who they are around this void, right? I mean, the way you said that was so visibly tangible as well. You still want to fill your life, you still want to keep moving forward. You don't want to replace the absence, the void that's now created, but you're still a person, you're still alive. So you need to figure out, okay, well, who am I amidst all of this stuff, And I know, um, there's hobbies and there's things outside of work and then whatever else, but obviously it's a process too. So, what have you found to be helpful? What has that process been like for you? Or, I guess just in general, like when you're going through anything, any sort of grief related, what skills or tools do you use to get through
Yeah,
that?
certainly all of this is easier said than done because I don't even
Right.
it's hard to say whether I'm doing it well or not. I think um
And that's my bad because we always want to be like, we're told we're doing a good job, A plus, like we're conditioned for that. So you're right.
I would love that, but this is one where I know yeah, I mean it's just impossible to really tell. And I think it is detrimental to hold yourself to a standard because this experience can be so unpredictable. I think the biggest things that have helped me, which I need to actively practice, these don't come naturally, are gentleness with myself and gentleness with others. You mentioned your friend who felt anger that people weren't kind of showing up in the ways that they hoped they would. And I think for me, I have to remind myself that the ways people show up, even if they don't resonate with me, or even if they annoy me, or even if I don't think they're what I want to hear, um, I try to step back and recognize that they come from a place of love and that I can appreciate that and be open to that, even if the form they take isn't perfect. The kind of motivation behind those gestures is enough. Um, and I think gentleness with myself as well, where some days I'll feel very normal. I'll feel kind of like my best self, where I'll be motivated and light and productive and just feeling good and hopeful. Um, and then the next day, I might wake up completely exhausted, in a bad mood, ruminating
Hmm.
about loss over and over and over again,
Hmm.
thinking,
Hmm.
I thought I was doing so well. Like, why today?
Right.
And I think just trying to recognize that I need to let myself process these in the ways I am. First, because I don't think trying to change the processing or control the processing is really going to help anything. Um, Second, because there's just no guide for this. Everyone's different. There's no kind of way to predict what being okay is eventually going to look like. And I think also it's important to recognize that I'm not going to be who I was uh, prior to this loss. That that self isn't accessible to me anymore in the same way, and that's okay too. This is again like a process of integrating this loss and these changes into a new identity, but one still connected to the one that came before.
Right. That is so profound. And of course, as we all continue to kind of become our new identities, it'll be interesting to learn like how you evolve, right? And what do you think about your former self compared to your new self, which could be premature to even, consider in this moment. Because also sometimes we're too myopic, like we're too close to the version that we're creating. So it's hard to tell, like, oh, this is where this one starts and that one ends. It's not so simple and not so cut and dry. But even as you were explaining, oh, go ahead. Do you have something?
Oh, I was agreeing with you.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah.
And then saying like, I think the past self really just had I think I'm jealous of that self more often than not, because it's nice to not have experienced loss. It's nice to have
Yes.
had a perspective of the world where that wasn't conceivable.
Yes. Completely. Ignorance is bliss, right? And how many times do the intelligent, self aware people wish that they were just a little more naive and a little less aware, right? Because the more you know, like the more responsibility you have or whatever. And it feels like you wish you could just go back to easier times, And for everyone that looks different, it could mean something as simple as childhood or whatever. But there are these older versions or different versions of ourselves that or just versions of other people who seem to have it so blissfully easy. Um, and it's a gift and a curse sometimes to have lived experiences and have self-awareness and be processing and be doing the work, because doing the work is exactly what it sounds like. It's a lot of work, but you're doing it to honor yourself, to even honor the losses, and to back what we said earlier, like you're saying that this is real. This actually happened. I'm not ignoring it. I'm not avoiding it. I'm not pretending that this doesn't affect me. I'm not just going about my life. I'm not trying to put a pretty bow, and just move on. All of that is easier, but then at what cost, right? And when people bottle things up, that's when they get sick. So nothing is easy, but you're choosing your hard, and then you're just making the most of it.
Yeah,
And
that's a
yeah, I was thinking too, just with my other family member on my mom's side, the last time I had spoken with her, she was in Ireland and I was in Ireland at the same time. And then a year and I just happened to think of her and reach out to her and found out we're both in the same country at the same time, but we were maybe 4 hours apart. And this was the old version of me, right? This was the one that was like, okay, cool. That's too inconvenient to go back to where I just came from. I'm on this plan. This is my itinerary and I'm going to keep moving forward. But of course, I want to see her and, let's meet up. And we talked about, we sent some emails back and forth. We talked about meeting up in Munich in the future. And the future never came in the way that I suggested over email, right? And about less than 18 months later, she passed and I went to Munich to be with her. And of course, she's no longer with us. And then I was there with, her siblings and our extended family and other cousins that aren't directly related, but it was just a chance to rekindle and start anew a lot of these relationships, which she may have been my closest connection at that point. And in her death, I now have all these new connections that maybe I wouldn't have had or invested in because I would have just had her. So she taught me a ton through this process of passing on. But at the same time, I had so much guilt and I was really mad at myself for not seeing that through. I follow through on so many things in life. Why did I not follow through on that? Why did I not make plans with her? Like, why did that fall through the cracks? And of course, on some level, I've told myself like she could have probably done the same thing. So there is that part, right? Where it's like, okay, it takes two and you want reciprocity. So that's valid. But I can only control myself. And I knew I didn't want to live that way anymore. Like that version of me who prioritized my itinerary over seeing a family member who I love, like, no, that's not who I am anymore. And I'm grateful for that rude awakening. And I call it rude because I was like, excuse me, that was not okay. So, and I find silver linings and I'm grateful for all the people who are in my life now as a result of her no longer being in my life. Of course, I would love for her to still be in my life too, but I know if she was, I wouldn't have had this huge perspective shift and life would have just continued on, right? Like they're just in your life until a nice ripe age and then they can leave because it's okay. Like okay, I'll allow it because that's okay. Um and then again, like I said, I mean, I had so much angst or whatever it was, and not that I'm necessarily encouraging people to chase closure because I know closure feels like a finite sort of finality. But for me, I needed to let go of all of this guilt I was holding and all of these feelings of what if and could have done this different and this and that. I mean, it wasn't productive for me and it was keeping me in a really sad state and not just allowing this new reality to wash over me and accept it and learn what I've learned, but like move forward, right? So I recently went back to Ireland and went to the place intentionally where she was the last time we talked. The place I didn't go to 2 years ago, right? Or however long it's been, maybe three at this point. Time really isn't relevant. It's the point that I went there to really be with her, even though I was by myself physically. But spiritually, I felt that she was with me. The sun's shining, the wind's blowing around me, and I felt really connected with her. But I also grieved. I was like screaming and crying in the car and saying all the things as if I could talk with her. And then remembering things from even my childhood and be like, were you aware of that? Like, because, we don't know anything about the afterlife. And in my mind, people who've moved on now have a view of everything. They're omniscient, like, they know everything. So I'm like, well, just in case you didn't know about this, blah, 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 blah. This happened, right? So now we're having like girly pop talk, and I'm just like so happy. But I'm sharing all this, and I know it's a long story, but I'm sharing it because that for me helped me move through my grief. Like I allowed it to happen and to be messy and to exist, and then I prioritized it. And I showed up for her in a way that I wish I had the awareness to do several years prior, but I have it now. So let me do it now. And then I got a lot of closure from that. And I'm not saying I'll never grieve or feel sad again, because like you said, it's not linear. So I'm not at all suggesting, okay, I'm done, even though I love that feeling, right? Like I want to be done. But it was just so healing to let myself go through that. And that was how I dealt with it. But I know everyone, the point is everyone is going to deal with things differently. You have to know who you are and follow that intuition to let it lead and guide you through the pain that you're feeling, and do it in your own way on your own time, but do it. Like you deserve to come out the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the aspect of that you talked about around guilt and feeling the kind of what if I had just done this, or what if I had put in a little more effort, or what if I had kind of forced this interaction to happen when it didn't seem like it was possible. It's hard to struggle with that once you don't get a second chance. I also, on the flip side of that, think it's easy to overweight how much of a difference that would have made. I think sometimes, would it have fundamentally deepened the close connection that you already had? Would it have been, you know, would it have made that big of a difference? And we all want more time with people we've lost, without a doubt. Like I think that is so natural and so real, and that in itself is meaningful and makes a difference. I think when it comes to worrying about if the person knew how much you valued them, which is kind of what's the root of those worries for me. Worrying like, oh, if I didn't make my love evident in that way, did they know it was there? Um, I think that it comes through in ways that we don't anticipate or control. And I try to remind myself of that as well, where um, that specific gesture or that specific time would not have fundamentally changed this person's impression of my deep care for them, and the love I had for them in my life. So I try to remind myself of that. It seems like, oh, if only like I'd done this, or if only we'd kind of made this trip happen or what have you. But it's hard for
Exactly.
sure.
Right. And I've even thought about that in the sense that had I met up with her before she passed, would her death have hit me as hard as it did? Or would I have felt like that meetup was the closure and that I didn't need to like go over the pond, across the pond for the funeral and make such an effort to rekindle all of these relationships with our extended family abroad and blah, 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 right? Because if you feel like things are okay, that's where you're complacent and there's no change happening there. And it crossed my mind. I'm like, maybe it had to unfold this way for me specifically to be activated to go and do these things and go out in the world and show up differently. And I'm thrilled with my takeaways and how I'm showing up differently. And of course, like I'm just making the most of it. But at the same time, I'm proud of myself for, having these realizations and doing things differently because I'm also focused way more on reciprocal relationships in my life than just, okay, I should do this and blah, 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 and kind of going through the motions or just having really shallow friendships or relationships in my life that are checking the box, but they're not as fulfilling as I would like them to be in the long term, because we do have a finite amount of time in the day, in our lives, all this stuff. And it's an accumulation of present moments. So how do you want to, spend the present moment? And that's up to you. And I think we realize that in different capacities at different points in life. This is not, I'm sure, not the only time I'm ever going to have this realization, but it'll look different the next time I have it. And I'll learn something even more profound that I'm like, wow, how could I have not seen that back then? But I don't see it now. This is what I see. And I'm working with what I see. Our brains can only take in so much information at a time. So let's work with what we have. But it's
Absolutely.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say that like life would be boring if everything was figured out, but
Right.
there
Right.
is a kind of uh, movement and growth which feels meaningful in kind of going, yeah, coming to these new realizations, even if they stemmed from deep losses.
Right. Absolutely. And I know this conversation is so powerful and rich, and I want to end it on a little bit of a high note. But earlier, when we were talking about work and like, eating what you kill and all of that, it reminded me of the trip you did recently with the horseback riding, the hawk, and hunting. And you described it like going back to the 1800s. So on that happy note, do you mind just like telling us a quick story time?
Absolutely. I love that eating what you kill is the connection point to this
Yeah.
trip. But yeah, for reference, October of last year, I went on about a 2 week trip. I guess it was actually 10 days, 10-day trip to Western Mongolia, where it was a horseback riding trek, where we were staying in yurts or gers, out in the vast freezing desert landscape. And every day we would ride out with two eagle hunters through up and down the mountains while they and their eagles would search for foxes, launch. The hunters would launch the eagles to go after the foxes, and they would sometimes be successful, sometimes not, but would indeed eat what they killed when the time came. So it never went above -5 Celsius, which I say sounding like I'm fully versed in
Right.
Celsius. I am not. This was just what what my sense was at the time. Certainly below freezing. We can say that.
Yeah.
Absolutely
It's
freezing.
cold. It sounds bitter cold. And if it never went above that, then you were just cold all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So that meant many, many, many layers, even while riding on a warm animal. Um,
Right.
yeah, there was something about it that was incredibly transformative. I think because the world that I was in for those 10 days was so completely removed from the world that I know, which is the mark of a good trip, of course. But it really was elemental in a way that my concerns were primarily around warmth and sleep and food, staying on the horse, of course. And I, in some ways, was along for the ride, but was also kind of guiding this animal through this terrain where there were no major landmarks or no way for someone who didn't know the land to navigate. Just vast, open, snowy steppe.
Right.
And I would say that galloping across that landscape um, on horseback did at the time make me feel like I outran my grief, or like I outran the heavier sadness at the time, which was really bearing down on me more regularly. Um, and yeah, I came back with to this world feeling
Yeah.
a bit alienated, and like that experience was maybe wasn't real, or maybe hadn't happened. But yeah, it was a journey.
Yeah. It sounds like it. And it sounds so freeing to just be galloping on a horse through a vast open wilderness, that's almost stuck in time. The way you've described it too, it feels like going back in time and you're completely removed from everything else. And to have something on planet Earth that's preserved in that way feels so unlikely in this like digital age that we live in. And we're inundated with media and entertainment and every distraction under the sun, right? And then this is, just like you said, so elemental. It's you're getting your basic needs met and that's it. And that's what you get to worry about and focus on. And you don't have to think about anything else, it's just how do we get that fox? And it was eagles, not hawks, but it was the bird that's helping you,
Golden,
which I
golden
love.
eagle.
Yeah. Golden eagle.
Even having dead foxes tied to their saddles, the hunters had TikTok, so it wasn't that.
Okay.
Yeah, like
So they're aware. Okay. Got it. Got it. I'm thinking literally like
I
another
didn't
world.
have a connection, but there were ways to connect to the internet and to
Okay.
drive into the nearby city. Um,
If you
so while
wanted
it was
to.
very
Yeah.
removed,
Hmm.
I saw the hunters on TikTok. So it wasn't. It
That's
wasn't.
too funny. Yeah.
Maybe there's nowhere on Earth where people don't have that kind of access anymore.
Right, right. Okay, fair, fair. But still, such a cool experience, Western Mongolia. I mean, I've been looking at horseback riding safaris in Africa, which I shared with you when I heard about your trip, because I was like, wait a second, maybe we should do this together, So more to come on that, hopefully, in the future. But it's been amazing having you on the show, Emily. I love just getting to chat with you. Such a deep and personal conversation that hopefully the audience can listen to and see themselves in, and maybe, have some inspiration along the way. But do you have any final thoughts before we close? Anything we haven't touched on or anything else that's top of mind for you?
Not really that I can think of. I've just so enjoyed our conversation and have even realized ways in which our personalities are more similar than I knew before. So I think this was just a really lovely conversation, and appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I'm so glad to hear that we're discovering even more common things about each other, because it's just such a gift. I've always looked up to you. I think you're so cool. And for you to see me and think you see some of you in me, I'm flattered. So thank you for that.
I'll take it.
Um, yeah, perfect, perfect. Amazing show. Okay.
You are my most important listener, and I can't thank you enough for spending your time with me. If this content resonates with you, then hit subscribe. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube by following @ConnectorQueen. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you again on the next episode of Becoming You.